Thanks a lot, Rosa. So I'm Jean-Sébastien Brock from IECP, Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy, and I will complement the presentation done earlier by Bruno and Adrien that shows, let's say, the potential and the different solutions for sustainable space cooling. Now we will discuss a bit how we can promote these solutions. I will start with an overview of the EU policy framework, and then Julia Comporto will complement with the first part of this work that has screen financing schemes in European countries. For the EU policy framework, we look at it through the lens of space cooling. So most of you may be already familiar with all these pieces of legislation. And we look at it from the equipment level up to the urban level. And I will present them a bit more in details quickly. So at the equipment level, that's mostly about market regulations dealing with efficiency and environmental impact. On the one hand, the objective is to provide consumers with relevant information to purchase the relevant devices for their needs. Together, so that's the part of energy labeling, and then eco-design is here to remove from the market the least efficient devices. For air conditioners, you have on top of that the specific regulations for the refrigerants with the objective to phase down the refrigerants that have a too high global warming potential. As a reminder, these are EU regulations, which means that they are directly applied in the same way in all EU member states. At the building level, that's a bit different. At the next slide, the Energy Performance Directive. The main provisions deal with the overall energy performance of buildings, and in the calculation of this energy performance, space cooling and ventilation are taken into account among the 5 main end uses. And here, in a sense, you can find the same logic as for the regulation of products. So you have the information of building owners and occupants through the energy performance certificates, and then minimum energy performance requirements to be set in national regulations. On top of that, you have provisions for the operation of technical systems with mandatory inspections or alternative approach for large air conditioning systems, together with the promotion of building automation systems, with overall, let's say, the objective to optimize the way technical systems are used in buildings. And then recently there was a lot of debate about how to boost renovation rates, and the upcoming publication of the EPD recast will now change the previous long-term renovation strategy into building renovation plan, and also introduce minimum energy performance standards for existing buildings. As it's a directive, it has to be transposed by each member state. And one thing we are currently doing in COOLIFE is to review how every member state is specifying and addressing cooling needs in the national regulation, especially the regulations for buildings. In the next slide, we look at the highlights in the EPD recast that stress the need to better consider summer comfort overall, and to promote passive cooling techniques. So that's also in line with the solutions that were presented earlier by Bruno and Adrien. But then when you go in the text, you see that that's, let's say, injunctions for member state, but there is no mandatory provisions or particular requirements related to space cooling still in the articles of the directive, because as it was shown also by Lucas and by Bruno, the demand for space cooling is very different from one country to another. So that's definitely something to be managed at the national level. In the next slide, we see then what Lucas has presented. So the other side, so let's say the market regulation for products, and the EPBD deals with what we could say the demand side of space cooling. Then on the supply of cooling, you have provisions in the Energy Efficiency Directive, comprehensive assessment, and now with the new EED, the requirement for member states to support local authorities to develop local heating and cooling plans. And on the other hand, the Renewable Energy Directive, but I will not speak about that again. That was very well presented by Lucas. And on top of that, during the panel discussion, you will get insight from the cooling down project that also deals more specifically with the renewable part of space cooling. As mentioned by Lucas, the one thing from these provisions is that they encompass heating and cooling together, and that mostly for the moment, because space heating is more important in terms of energy consumption, let's say the development of space cooling from these provisions is still limited. In the next slide, we go to the urban model and the link to adaptation. So the EU framework for adaptation mostly comes from the European Climate Law adopted in 2021 that requires member states to develop national adaptation strategies and plans, and also requires the EU to adopt its own strategy on adaptation. And this European strategy reminded the importance of the health impact of heat waves, and also to prepare buildings for the future climate changes, and to in a sense, which is captured with the climate resilient buildings keyword. And it also promotes solutions that are, let's say, in a general way, nature-based solutions to address the effect of urban enhancement that were also pointed by Lucas earlier. Overall, what we see is that so far there is a lack of linkage between mitigation and adaptation strategies and measures, while there would be a benefit to address space cooling with integrated approaches. And also in the panel discussion, you will hear from the French platform Couleur My City. That is a very good practice to support look at actions, and that consider all the solutions all together, so work from both sides, mitigation and adaptation. In the next slide, that's something that may be important in the legal basis to address space cooling. So it will probably take a bit of time before it becomes visible in the implementation by member state. But there is a new definition for energy poverty in the energy efficiency in the new energy efficiency directive, which clarifies that cooling is part of the basic needs. And here, when you read cooling, you should not understand it as everyone should have air conditioner. I hope that the presentation by Bruno and Adrian already convinced you that there are many other solutions to meet cooling needs. And so the meaning of that is that everybody should be able to keep her or his home cool enough in summer. So choosing the most relevant solutions for that. And more specifically about summer energy poverty, you will also hear during the panel discussion from another project named Cool to Rise. To end on this overview in the next slide of the EU policy framework, from this review, we identified already a few key issues that we will work on further to develop a recommendation later in the project. To develop sustainable policies for sustainable space cooling. One is to ensure that the most relevant solutions are considered. I already mentioned that one of the objectives is that, okay, air conditioner can be a solution, but that's not the only one. And we should avoid to create bias in the policies towards more air conditioning systems alone. Another issue is to make the other alternatives available. That's also something related to the supply side of the solutions for sustainable space cooling. Second key issue, group of key issues, that's to consider the impact that matter the most in terms of energy consumption and energy cost. That might not be the main criteria to decide investment. Comfort, as pointed by Adrian and Bruno, is much more important. Else, also especially considering the impact of heat waves, peak load, that's also related to heat waves. And then, depending on the segment of the building stock, you can have productivity, business conditions, etc. that can be very important. Another group of key issues is related to setting conditions for renovation schemes to improve summer comfort as well, because we know that in most cases, obviously, these schemes are meant to reduce the consumption for space heating. And the last point that is also related is to, and mentioned in my previous slide about the urban level, is to promote integrated approach in the two ways. So considering heating and cooling together. So let's say as a single thermal comfort objective, and developing strategy that address both together mitigation and adaptation. And with that, I hand it over to Julia for the review of the 2016 schemes.
Thank you, Jean-Sebastian. Maybe there are any questions for Jean-Sebastian before I take over with the financing?
So far, there's no question for Jean-Sebastian.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you again for taking the time to join this exciting event. My name is Beautiful Porta. I'm a researcher at Inc. And in COOLIFE, I lead the research on financing schemes and the capacity building. Rosa. Thank you. So there are a few animations through the slides, so I'll ask you to follow through with the discussion. So the reason why we decided to have a review of financing schemes for cooling is to create the first European-wide mapping of financing options, both at the European and the national level, because we couldn't find one, and this is a fastly changing landscape. So we wanted to have an understanding of what is the current financing offer, and both from private credit institutes and in terms of public support, and also to be able to facilitate access to these financing instruments for anyone who could be a beneficiary of them. So for that, we looked at the European level, at the national level, we collected some local insights, and we tried to collect both public and private instruments. Now, the methodology that we used has 4 steps. First, we identified which financing instruments would be relevant through a thorough literature review and a desk research, both in English and in each local language. Then we classified, collected, and documented all instruments. In total, we had 556 between private and public schemes. Following that, we analyzed those instruments per country, per sector, per type of scheme, and we ran a correlation matrix with a number of additional relevant indicators. And finally, we complemented that with a series of expert interviews to understand what are the main drivers and barriers to financing space cooling, and what could close the investment gap. Among the main findings, here you can see the type of instruments in the first pivot table for public schemes, in the second one for the private schemes, and then the overall number of schemes divided per sector. As you can see, the percentages don't sum up to 100 when looking at the sectors, because the same schemes could cover multiple sectors. So there could be a scheme supporting building efficiency in terms of building envelope, and at the same time efficiency and increased use of renewables in heating and cooling systems, for instance. Now, what pops up is that the traditional instruments are the most common ones. So among public schemes, we see grants and subsidies, loans and soft loans, and tax incentives. Among the private schemes, green loans, green mortgages, and green bonds. We do see that cooling is not as often the direct target of public schemes as well as private instruments, as it happens with broader topics as with the building envelope and efficiency and renewables in heating and cooling. This is because of several reasons. One is that at the moment the cooling demand is still significantly lower than the heating demand, although this, as we have seen, is changing. The other thing is that cooling is not always perceived as a need as heating. So summer comfort is still not targeted as directly as if summer comfort could be endured while winter comfort has to be provided. This at least is what came out from the expert interviews. We of course it's not openly addressed in the policies that we have identified. Next slide, please. In previous literature, there were many more types of schemes that had been identified as used or suitable for greater efficiency and to supporting the energy transition in the building stock, although not all these instruments were found in the mapping that we ran, and that is because they might not be as easy to offer and to administer, and they are most suitable for an individual setup, so that a single project can set them up, but they are not found as offered in public incentives or by commercial banks. One more thing to say is that while the smaller projects can be financed through, for instance, a green loan or a commercial product that is offered by many banks across Europe, the largest projects, such as, for instance, a district cooling network, would be the object of individual negotiations. So they are not offered in the credit institutions pages. But one advantage of such mapping is that at least we know which credit institutes already offer green products, so they already have a division or a propensity to support green finance. Looking at the number of schemes, now here we have a pivot table for the public and private schemes that is ordered by total number of schemes. So you look at the first column, and you see that the schemes with the countries with the highest number of schemes are most often countries either with the largest population and consequently the largest gross floor area and the largest energy demand in buildings for heating and cooling together, or, for instance, for the case of Belgium, those that have chosen a multiplication of the schemes at the federal level. So you have schemes that are offered by each region, rather than having a scheme that is offered at the national level and then implemented by the regions. You see that cooling is one of the sectors that have the lowest coverage. But if you look, for instance, at Italy, Spain, and Portugal in the lower part, Italy and Spain have a significant cooling demand, have significant cooling needs, but don't have a large number of schemes. Portugal, conversely, has a limited number of schemes, but if you look at the total number, all the schemes that are present in Portugal are suitable for cooling. Here we are looking at the lower part of the pivot table, and we see that, for instance, Romania, Greece, Malta, Cyprus, that have significant numbers of cooling degree days, have little or no schemes addressing cooling, and this is a very significant insight for future development. Now, coming to the expert interviews, one of the points that emerged is that it is known that few policies and incentives target directly cooling. So cooling can be part of some financing schemes, but it's mostly not the main objective. It's a secondary or just a complementary objective. Sorry, Rosa, I will have to bother you for each bullet point. Then sustainable space cooling, for instance, is not always seen as a green investment. And in this case, it is addressed through regular loans. So when providing a regular loan, credit institutions do not ask about technical aspects and profitability profile or risk profile of the project. They just ask about what is the ratio between the total investment and the amount that is asked in credit. Among the main barriers, we see lack of clear economic returns because there are different technologies, because if when comparing heating technologies, there is always a heating supply, so you're just comparing the future costs to what would be the other costs of the other technology. When talking about cooling, if the alternative is not supplying any space cooling, then it's hard to prove what would be the energy saved and what would be the emission saved by providing cooling. And this differs greatly if we're looking at commercial spaces and business areas where you have to have space cooling, because otherwise customers will not spend time there, will not use the services, will not purchase further, for instance, in shopping centers, malls, or in restaurants, or in business towers. When we compare this to residential dwellings, where you can endure a summer without any air conditioning, for instance, or any other technology supplying space cooling. But then we come back to what colleagues were mentioning about the health-related issues, especially for the most vulnerable population. The regulation was regarded as inadequate by the expert that we interviewed, because cooling is either not explicitly mentioned or mentioned but not with direct and specific measures or metrics. Among the main drivers, improved market conditions is likely to provide a greater access to finance for sustainable space cooling, having legislative targets, so compulsory targets that must be achieved, and increasing the efficiency of the technology available. And one last point, what is still needed to increase the supply of sustainable space cooling and the access to finance for sustainable space cooling is most of everything awareness building. So explaining to the wider public, to the policymaker, to all stakeholders that there are other technologies, that is not just air conditioning, that the need for summer comfort is growing, that the demand is growing, that we have to act upon that, not only from the technological point of view, but also from the point of view of the policy and the financing instruments that are available, more transparent information about the green finance share for private institutions and investors, technical tools that could choose among different options, and in general promoting a holistic approach that includes cooling in the building standards and in the climate regulations at national and the local level. Thank you, Nora. That was